guys are going to really enjoy this puzzle. And yes, we're going to get to the two queens that you saw on the thumbnail. But here's the situation. It's white to play and save the game somehow, even though black's pawn is one space away from becoming a queen. Before I say anything else, what do you think white should play to save this game? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the only move here for white is queen to c4 check. And if you're wondering why that's the only move, let's just imagine you played a different move, like maybe you tried to move your king to come take some pawns. Black's going to simply go check and then get their king away from this pin, and eventually this is going to happen, okay? And their king is in a good place. I mean, yeah, you can throw in a few random checks, but trust me, eventually black's going to be able to figure out a way out of it. King b4, and I don't know what the move is here. I guess they just run up the board, and eventually you run out of good checks. Let's see, what is it? King c5, and anyway, the game goes on. Eventually, they're going to get another queen. You can't stop it, okay? So with that in mind, you have to go queen to c4 check. And this puts black into an awkward spot because you don't want to go to a3 because of why. That's correct. If you said queen a4, you are correct. That's just checkmate. So you have to go back in the corner. And now it's white to play again. What do you play here? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, it's queen to a4 check. And the only move now for black is queen to a2. And what do you play now for white? You had a chance to look at that. Hopefully you didn't say queen to d1 check, because that doesn't cut it, because now black promotes. Not only do they get the queen, they block your check, and at the same time they put you in check and fork your king and your queen, so you have to trade, and it's all over. You lose, okay? So you can't do that. This was the really tricky moment, well, one of the really tricky moments in the puzzle. The only move is king to c5. This is a brilliant move, setting one of the most incredible stalemate traps you will ever see. If black takes your queen, look at this, look at this, look at this pawn, look at this pawn, and guess what? You have no moves. It's a stalemate. You just stalemate tricked black by sacrificing your queen. That's amazing. That's incredible stuff, right? So that's one part of it. But also, we have to talk about what happens here if black says, well, I don't really care about this queen. I'm going to get my own queen. And here we are with the two queens. And now what do? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, it's queen to d4 check. And what's so incredible about this position is that even though black has two queens, they have no way to get out of the checks. You can block here. Guess what I'm going to do? Check again. You can block with this queen to try to change it up. Guess what I'm going to do? Check again. You can block with this one to try to change it up. I'm going to go check. It doesn't matter what black does. There's always going to be a check, either like this or like this or like this. Always. It's amazing, right? Now, you might say, great, we did it. That's it. The end. No. Trust me when I say there's a lot more to come here. So black, of course, has an option right at this moment where they don't have to take your queen and they don't have to get a queen. They can actually play the move, wait for it, b1, knight. They get a knight. Now, why would they want to get a knight? Well, one of the main ideas here is that if you try to go for the perpetual checks, they can block, and then they block with the knight, and guess what? Because it's a knight and not a queen, they have this escape square for their king. They can just run up here to a2. And now you can try to check, but I mean, they're going to be able to escape, and the game goes on. It's going to be good for black. So going back to the original position here, when they promote to the knight, we have one move that draws the game. What should we play? You had a chance to look at that. It's actually just trading the queens. Just trade the queens. And now we have an interesting situation where black has the knight, which is about to make a beeline towards the pawns. We have our king in a better position than black's king. But it's still tricky. So what would you do if you're white in this position trying to draw the game? Actually, I'll go ahead and tell you. This one's pretty obvious. You play king c6. You're trying to go for the pawn. You don't really have any other logical moves because the pawns kind of box out your king. So black plays the knight. You grab the pawn. And then they go for the check. Now, white to play and draw. What do you play here? If you had a chance to look at that, really both of these moves would be okay. You're just going to go and hunt down this pawn, essentially, is what you're trying to do. So, king over. Black says, no, I don't want you to do that. I'm going to try to defend it. Knight to f4. And now it's white to play and draw the game. What should you play next? Got a chance to look at that. King to e7 is the best way to do it. You could also go to d6. It's still a draw. But what you're trying to do here is basically say, look, if you don't do something with your knight, I'm going to go over to f7. I'm going to take this pawn, and then I'm going to push it, and I'm actually going to win the game. So black says, okay, fine. I'll grab your pawn with check, and you can take me here if you want. King takes e6. And now, this is an interesting, and by the way, I should mention, you also could go king f7 and try to grab this pawn as well. That's another try, but black's just going to take here with check, and then they're going to eventually sacrifice their knight for this pawn, and it's a draw. Okay, so it's more interesting if you take this pawn. Now, I want you guys to flip the board in your head for a second. Just pretend that you're playing as black, okay? White has just captured this pawn. You're playing as black. The pawn's going this way, of course, but there's only one move here for black, which saves the game. Otherwise, black actually loses. So what's the move that you need to play here if you're black? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the only move here is knight to h4. Now, that might seem like a really weird move to you, but it actually has a very important point. But to understand that, you need to understand what's the problem with all the other moves. So let's just say you decided, you know what, I'm going to bring my king over because I need my king to get, close to these pawns. Why not? Watch what's going to happen here. Actually, let me ask you guys, what is going to happen here? White to play and win. What's the winning move? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is king to d6. And what you are doing is getting ready to push this guy. But at the same time, you're going to be boxing out black's king, which is important because after you trade these guys off, you're going to need to get to this pawn first. Well, this is kind of advanced stuff here, but this is pretty cool. So king to d6. Black says, okay, let me try to run forward. You push your pawn. And notice, the king is boxing out black's king here. You push. Look at this. The king is not in time. You're going to push your pawn, and now you have a winning king and pawn ending. The only thing black can do is come here. You grab this guy. Your king is in front of the pawn. All you have to do is step out of the way. You get the queen, and you win. Incredible, right? So that's one of the problems here for black if they decide to try to move their king. Sorry. After we take here, they try to move their king. It's not going to work out because I just showed you. But what else should they play? Well, you might have been tempted to say a check. I mean, why not, right? Again, white is going to win. If you'd like to pause, what's the winning move here for white? You had a chance to look at that. There's a couple of ways to do it, but the easiest is probably just to go to f7. And you're hunting down this pawn, and you're also threatening to push this guy. They could try to defend it. Doesn't really matter. You're going to go here, force them to sacrifice the knight, and then you're going to win. The king is just too far. So you see the problem, right? This is the problem for black in this position. Our king is in a very good place. We're about to just come here, take this, or push this, or whatever, and win. So how does black save the game? Like I mentioned, knight to h4. Now, why is this such a good move? Because we have to do something with our king. We can't push the pawn or we just lose it. We can't go here or here. So we really only have two options. We either come this way and try to push the pawn like that, or we go here and try to capture this pawn. So let's start with this one. If we go here, black has an incredible move. Black to play and draw the game. You had a chance to look at that. Knight to f3. It's a fork on our pawns. But what's amazing about this is even if we push one, when they capture it, it's another fork. They're able to sacrifice the knight for both pawns and just get a draw like that. So that's pretty incredible. It doesn't really matter which one we push. Even if we don't, they're just going to gobble them up, something like this probably, and it's a drawn endgame. By the way, if you're wondering how this is a draw, check. And even though it looks like we're maybe trapping the knight here, they just go back and it stops that. Thus from pushing the pawn, okay? And watch this. If we tried, let's just say this and this, black has another idea, knight to d7, and again, it's threatening a fork here if we ever push this. Okay, so pretty complicated endgame. Don't worry about that too much, but the point is it's a draw, okay? Amazing, right? This is an amazing position. Okay, let's keep going. So again, knight to h4. We had king f7, which we looked at. Black was going to have the fork. And the other way we could try it would be king to d6, thinking that, okay, instead of going for that, we're just going to be happy with this e-pawn and push it. But again, black's going to go for the same fork. And if we push, they can take this, and it looks like, wait a second, we've done it, but black actually has a nice idea. If you'd like to pause, what's black going to play here? Got a chance to look at that. That's correct. Knight to e4 check, followed by knight to f6, which they can make use of because we didn't take the g pawn. So it's incredible position. Like, there's all these different lines. We're like, okay, that's a draw if you do this just right, and it's a draw if you do this just right. It's amazing, right? It's amazing. We can come in here and black. What is the draw? Oh, yeah, it's the same kind of idea here. They can move their king, but we grab the pawn, and the knight is able to defend. The knight just can kind of keep jumping around, and eventually it's going to sacrifice. Amazing stuff, right? So just to recap what happened here. Black's about to get another queen, which we do let them do by sacrificing our queen, which is a stalemate trap. And if they get the queen, we have a perpetual check, which is another way to draw the game. And then if they decide, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to get the knight, then we just trade the queen, and we end up going into another draw, which is just a draw in endgame based on material at the end of everything when all the pieces get traded. But if black's not careful and doesn't play perfectly, they actually lose and we could win. And we looked at all those different variations where the knight jumps around and the king has the pawn, and it's, I mean, incredible position. I hope that I did it justice and you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp. Play smart. Take care.